and welcome to all the panelists and all the members who've submitted their photographs and stories. It would be really nice if the audience who's listening in can write on in the chat box what are their expectations and what do they want to get out of this particular session, besides a change in a life-changing thought. Just to explain what we are going to do, all the panelists here were given 5 photographs to submit based on certain themes. And as a group, we're just going to watch those photographs and see how you can use those photographs to understand each other better and to build a map of resilience for each other. But before we start, there is a bonus round, just as many people land up a little late. So I thought there'd be a bonus round that I could keep and tell you a little bit about some basic tips in photography which can drastically improve your photographs. Especially with so many Zoom conferences happening around the world, what are the simple tips that we can use which will enhance our screen presence? Okay, so one of the first tips is I'm going to show you a picture, and the first tip is called the headroom. So the space between the top of the head and the top of your frame is known as the headroom. Okay, and the less it is, the more space is given to your face and the more the audience can connect with you. So Daisuke's screen space headroom is really poor. So is Munching's. Penny is acceptable, Ivan is acceptable, but if you reduce it even further, then it becomes better. So let me show you an example. Okay. Here, you see this headroom?
Where, yours?
On the screen, do you see this picture or the slide?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the space between the top of the head and the head. So this is okay, but many people you see are like this.
Yes.
Okay, so that's really not acceptable. So if you do this, just tilt your screen a bit and remove the head space, then suddenly the focus comes to your face and people can connect with you better. Okay, so that's the first rule. The second rule is called the rule of thirds. You know how when the eyes look at photographs, they don't look at the center of the screen, they look at towards the lines which are on the third. So you see the screen here, which means if you place yourself slightly off center, then people are more likely to look at your face rather than try and read the labels of books behind you. So their attention goes on your face if you're not off on center, but slightly off. Yeah, exactly. Daisuke is a good learner, right? And the third rule is many people forget to smile. If you see most of the Zoom sessions, even when people are looking at it, you feel that there is a lot of seriousness, gravity, and anger, which takes the audience away from them. But if you just manage a simple smile, it helps the audience connect with you. So that was for you, Ivan. That tip was basically for you. Okay, so just a simple smile would help. We're also waiting for Maypin to join us, but apparently she's stuck in a very important conference, and she'll join us midway. And none of the people have really written what their expectations are from this course, which means it's really easy for us. We can do whatever we want. Okay, so let's start by showing some pictures that you guys have sent, and we'll talk a little bit about those pictures. And we'll talk about what is resilience to each one of us. Okay, they're in a particular order, so you know when your picture is going to come. I'm going to just remove this and share the screen with all the pictures that we have taken. So the first task was to take a picture of something that represents resilience to you. I'm going to start with my picture, and then I'll just say a few words about it. We'll try and keep this less than a minute, under a minute, so that the picture speaks for itself. You can just explain the context of the picture. And if you exceed a minute, I'm going to ring a small bell to remind you that we're on a clock here, okay? So this is my picture. It's a flock of geese flying across the Himalayas, all the way from Mongolia down south into the southern parts of India. And they travel this long journey across the highest mountains in the world. And for me, that represented resilience. Munching?
Okay, this picture was taken in Christmas Island. So a few years ago, I was invited there, and it's a very inhospitable island south of Jakarta, belongs to Australia. And there was a refugee camp in the middle of it. They put the refugee camp there so that you can't escape. There's nowhere to run. But then I was walking on the jetty and I saw this guy jumping into the water. And the reason why it's also inhospitable because of the waves, which will smash your boats against the rocks. But then I found this guy jumping into the water, having a swim. And I think that represents kind of his resilience that, yeah, it's really a tough place, but somebody seems to be still able to have fun and survive.
Wow, thanks. Daisuke.
This is a picture of Ukedo Elementary School in Fukushima Prefecture in Japan. So almost 10 years ago, we had the earthquake and tsunami followed by the nuclear power plant incident. And this was a close. So it was hit by the tsunami and the earthquake, once in a 1,000 years kind of earthquake and tsunami. And still, the artifact we created, kind of remained. And there were more than 80 students studied there, but nobody died because they ran fast, from the tsunami and the earthquake. But still, there's nobody going back because of the radiation. So somehow, the artifact we built, remains after shocking national disaster. But if we are to live there or not, is a choice.
Right. So we had Maipin's picture, but I'll wait for her to come and explain it later. We'll move to Ivan.
Yes, this is a photo of a group of women farmers in the rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras. Despite all the challenges, especially brought about by climate change, they've had to face so many difficulties, so many changes in the environment. They still continue planting rice and preserving their cultural traditions as part of the whole cycle of the cultural landscape. And that for me is the resilience that they're showing resilience as they continue all these traditions.
Excellent. Thanks, Ivan. So you see, all of us have been exposed to examples of resilience, and we all have our own definitions of what resilience means to each one of us. This idea for this session came when I read this beautiful article in Harvard Business Review, which talked about a study. And this researcher went around the world and studied resilience, and he found something really interesting. He found that resilience is not just about your strength. It is not just about your skill set. It is about something very simple, which we often overlook. I'm going to share a small 3-minute film from the mountains of India. It's about a film from a mountain stream, and we'll try and learn about resilience from the mountain stream. Okay. So that was the story where he found that resilience is about recharging yourself, and the ability of humans to recharge themselves is what really creates the real resilience in them. And yet, because of our phones, of the screens which are so addictive, which we are all hooked onto, we are not able to really rest our minds. We are not able to give our minds the rest that it really deserves, because on an average, a person is looking at his screen about 150 times in a day. Even if you take a time of 1 minute per distraction, that's 2.5 hours. But usually the amount of time spent on screens is far, far higher. And with phones in everyone's pockets and a camera in every pocket, it's really simple to keep taking photographs mindlessly without really having any reason to share them or take them. So this whole session was, how can we use photography as a tool for mindfulness and as a tool for resilience, and how can this device of distraction become a mode for meditation, right? So the first step, before that, I've just created a poll. In case the audience is watching, I've just created a poll to ask you whether you're addicted to your phone, to see how relevant this session is to people. And there are two options. You can choose either one. So we'll get an answer soon. And then we'll move to the next photograph session, which is, how do you use photography to create mindfulness or to create resilience? The first exercise was, I asked all the participants, all the panelists, to take a picture of something that represents them. Okay, so we'll go back to our photographs and we'll talk a little bit about those photographs. I'm trying to unmute you, but I can't. I guess you'll have to unmute yourselves. Okay, I'm going to share the screen again. So any object in nature that represents you. For me, I think I'm represented by a cloud, but I didn't have the picture of a cloud. So I chose this picture of a stream, because the cloud gives itself away and becomes a stream which flows down the mountain back to the river and the ocean. And then again, the cycle repeats. So this is me as an invisible cloud, but seen through a stream. Manchin, that's...
So this picture was taken in Nepal, in Gorkha, after the earthquake. I was actually there with Rabi because we were on a project to rebuild some schools. And a few years back, I was in Thailand, and there was this guy who read my palm. We were just there for something else, and he just said, "Oh, I can read your palm." And he said, "Everything that you do seems to come across a lot of obstacles. So nothing you do have always been easy." And when I saw this valley, sort of thought about it. So yes, in a sense, I am like that river, but I see it more as I'm trying to get somewhere, but I keep having to first push all these boulders out of the way, I suppose.
Nice. Okay, next one is Daisuke.
Oh, this tree. It's a Zelkova tree. Next to my house, there is a park. I love walking around there. And, from the kind of two main stems, it branches out in many directions. And, my imagination, goes to anywhere, but we cannot move around, at the moment. And especially with the three kids, it's almost impossible. So I just kind of love the ambivalence between, how I would love to travel around that cannot be, but, still, you can see this kind of discrepancy turn it into enjoyable life.
Nice. The next one is by Mapin. I think the photograph explains itself. It's a tiny people tree growing in the cracks of Singapore. I don't think Mapin is here, but this photo is self-explanatory. And then we have Ivan.
This is a photo of the Philippine eagle. It's actually one of the largest eagles in the world. And it has been brought back from the brink of extinction. I believe that it represents me because despite all the challenges that I may be facing in life, I still am able to stand strong and proud, just like our national bird, and soar high and fly against all the difficulties that I have to face in life.
Wonderful. Thank you. So the whole idea was to share the fact that photography is not about the camera. Photography is about your mind and what is it that your mind sees and what is the meaning that your mind associates with a particular image. That is far more important than what you take with the camera. And that's the first step of training your mind to become more resilient by observing what is the meaning it is giving to these photographs. So if I were to give you one tip on how to build stories into your photographs, how to create meaning with your photographs, the simplest way to do that is to add contrast, which was our next exercise, is taking photographs which have contrast in them. Okay, so we are going to see some of the photographs and talk about some of the stories that came up through the next round of photographs, which is depicting contrasts in life. For me, it was about this tiny hut in the forests of Northeast India. It's about the contrast between man and his fields and the wild nature and the forest. I just felt that there is an opposite and yet they are connected with each other. So it brings them together. And also in this photograph, I saw the contrast between the light and the shadow, which is creating an island of a pool of light in this beautiful valley. Manji?
Okay, so this picture was taken on the fringes of Malaysia's national park. So this national park has jungles of 100 million years and a huge area of biodiversity. But so I was going camping with the women who were leading the group, the first two. They are from an indigenous tribe called the Batik, and they were originally completely nomadic. Except that development has kind of pushed them also to the fringes of the national park. So as we were camping with them, we were all kitted out like this woman, the third woman, with our, leech-proof socks and boots and backpacks and mats and all sorts of things. And all they had was a rattan mat, a rattan basket, one piece of cloth, and one knife, which they use for everything, cooking, chopping. They created their own sleeping place and they wore no shoes. So I think that represented the contrast in how we have changed and our relationship with nature.
Nice. I'll move to the next picture. That's okay.
So again, it's the park next to Meiji Shrine. Hopefully you can join us like next year at the Tokyo Summit.
Yeah.
We can walk around. In the winter, I like walking in the forest and then see all the leaves kind of drop out of the branches and then it just kind of turn yellow. And it's very cold. And, the other trees will color beautiful to red, but eventually all the leaves are gone. But still all these kind of energies lost and basically absorbed into the coldness. You see the kind of the light kind of penetrating through the forest. And I kind of the forthcoming of the warmer season, even within the midst of cold weather. So that's the contrast for me.
Nice. We'll see Maypin. Maypin is a coffee addict. And she's seeing all the contrast in different flavors of coffees that she's enjoyed across her life. And we'll move to Ivan.
This is a photo I took while the plane was landing at International Airport, and you can see the stark contrast between the modern skyscrapers and the smaller dwellings, which shows the inequalities that are very evident in the Philippines. You have very modern developments surrounded by less developed and less fortunate dwellings. And this is something that you will always see when you land in Manila, how large the disparity is between those who have the resources and those who don't.
Right, thanks. I'm going to end this particular section with a photograph from the River Nile, and it talks about the story of resilience. What happens is in the middle of summer, peak summer, the River Nile floods, and it brings with it a lot of silt from the mountains. So while the floods are seen as a big conflict situation, but they are also what gives life to the floodplains of the River Nile. And that's what contrast teaches us, especially contrast in photography, that life is about contrasts and conflicts. And when you learn to embrace those conflicts, then you learn to embrace your own resilience. So that's a very important lesson from photography about resilience. And we move to the next section, which is about patterns. So I ask people to look for patterns. It's how you're training the mind to look for certain things in and around you. And one of the most beautiful things to look for is patterns. I'll share my pattern, and then we'll talk about stories from other patterns. So these are the apple trees in the mountains of the Himalayas, and the patterns in an apple tree are known as fractals. And it's the same patterns which are found in the retina inside our eye. And what they found was that when the human eye looks at patterns or fractals, it needs less information process to process them. The brain needs lesser portion power to process fractals or curves or how organic forms turn out in nature. But when it has to look at sharp edges or man-made objects, the brain power needed to process those images is far higher. So that's why looking at nature or studying patterns is very calming for the human mind. Vanche?
So this picture was taken at a rice paper kind of, I can't call it a plant, but it was a house of a villager who lost everything in the Rouge period. He was in Battambang, and he and his wife rebuilt their lives by making these very humble rice paper. Since they didn't have any equipment or anything, they just got these, made their own bamboo slats and started taking this one. I just thought the patterns that we try to create have to be so perfect, but what they have is actually kind of imperfect but beautiful, more beautiful at the same time.
Right. Thanks.
No.
Yeah.
So this is the Pantheon in Rome, and we as a family go to Rome every year. Unfortunately, we cannot this time, but I just love this building, which was built almost like 1900 years ago, and it's still there. And then if you look up, into the kind of to the ceiling, you see one hole, and then you see the beautiful patterns. Every day, from the sunrise to the sunset, you see the kind of sun comes in, through the hole in the center, and then that's also kind of moving as a pattern. So we kind of live in the pattern of going to Rome every year, go to Pantheon and go see the move of the sun into this amazingly beautiful pattern, after 1900 years. And then I see something, the importance of something that's kind of never changed beyond our lives or generations.
Beautiful. Thank you. This is Mayton's pattern. She was in the hospital, and she was hospitalized, and this pattern and this picture got her out of this whole negative cycle of thought and made her want to get up and get out. So once she's here, I think she can explain this better, but we'll move to Ivan.
This is a photo of lanterns of San Fernando in the Philippines. They come out every Christmas, and it's a very amazing showcase of colors and lights. These lanterns have about 5,000 to 7,000 light bulbs each. They're about 20 feet in height, and they're basically like a kaleidoscope of color that really dances with the music. And of course, each beat you'd see a different pattern coming out of the lantern. So there's always a different combination of colors as the together with the music.
Nice, thank you. So when we begin to look at patterns in outside world, we begin to see patterns in our inner world. Just like Daisuke was saying that how his life also followed a pattern. But we also look at our behavior and we begin to see patterns in our own inner nature, because that's the way nature has been designed. It works in patterns. This photograph is a fractal from the river Colorado. It's dry now because of all the dams that US has built. The Colorado no longer reaches the sea. But at one point it was filled with lakes and a lot of beautiful forests. And surprisingly, a few years back, when they released the water to see what would happen, they found that within a few days, the entire ecosystem came back to life. The fish came back, the dragonflies came back, the insects came back, the birds came back to feed on them, and then the children, and there were festivities all around. So resilience is a pattern that is built into nature, and it is built into our body. It's just that we don't give ourselves the space to recharge, that we cannot create that resilience in ourselves. So it's really important to allow our brains to find that recharge. And that brings us to the final photograph that we asked everyone to submit, which was a photo that brings you great peace, something that brings you great calm. For me, this is on the border of India and Nepal. I wonder if you can see those tiny lights in the distance on your screen. Those are the village lights, and just seeing the balloon float silently amongst this beautiful mountain range was what really brought me a great calm.
So this is one of my favorite travel pictures of all time. So it was taken in Kunming in China. I was walking by this park and I just saw these guys playing chess. And it just was a very peaceful scene to me. Like nobody was in a rush and they had all the time in the world. And there was also something about the way the walls are, which made you think that it's been there for a long time, that has seen everything and survived. And also the old man in the mouse suit. So he probably has seen some really terrible times, but he made it through, and he's kind of happy enjoying his retirement. So I hope to survive that well as well.
Nice. Nice. Okay.
So this is again the park next to my house. And once every 10 years, we have this unique combination of cherry blossoms and snow. And this year, we didn't have anybody out because of the COVID. And, we could basically monopolize this amazingly beautiful, kind of scenery under complete silence. So you could basically listen to the snowfall, onto the, cherry blossom, basically petal, on the layer of the petal, you can hear the snowfall, kind of landing, to the ground. So, I mean, it's very, very difficult to, and it's very stressful life, that we have this year. But this kind of shocking combination that brings still, the pattern of life every 10 years. And, you kind of find peace if you're eager, in such, kind of unusual occasions.
Beautiful. This is Mapin's photograph. It is a photograph of a piano. For her, peace comes from music, and this piano was what really got her out of a tough situation mentally, and brought her back to life in a particular difficult phase of her life. Ivan?
This is another photo from the rice terraces here in the Philippines. As I was standing watching the sunset, I was in awe of the beauty of nature, and gave me peace. I could have stood there for much, much longer if I did not have to move back to the town. But this is this scene, this photo of nature, this really, really beautiful picture of nature is something that really brought peace to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. So I want to end this session by saying that our brain has a logical side to it, and it has a creative side to it. So the logical decision-making side is more or less the voice in our head, and it's what really is activated a majority of the times. That's why when people find it difficult to sleep, that voice in their head doesn't shut off. Whereas the creative side, or the rest and digest side of our brain, is more to do with feelings and emotions. And when you begin to look at photographs by the emotions they convey and the emotions they bring forward, then we are activating the creative side of our mind. And it is allowing the logical decision-making side of our brain to find rest. And that's why holding an image of calm in your mind is far more powerful than trying to do anything else. And that's why photographs are a way to hold on to those images. There is a story that I want to end with. This story that you see on the screen is from Tikal, a place in Guatemala. It belonged to the Mayan civilization. So the Mayans were one of the leading civilizations of their times, but they died out without, leaving any remains behind except these ruins. And the scientists, the reason they found was that while they were growing, they were not taking care of the rivers which nourished them. So when the droughts came and the irrigation channels dried up, all their development, which was focused towards war and accumulation and growth, they failed and they could not survive. And those rivers are actually symbolic, they are metaphors. Like for each one of us, there are rivers which nourish us. Like for me, it's filmmaking or photography. For somebody, it's music. But those rivers are what really create resilience in our lives. But we don't somehow get too busy accumulating things that we forget to recharge our rivers. And the whole idea of this session was to, in a fun, interactive way, talk about how we can recharge ourselves and create resilience for ourselves. So more or less, that's the closure to this session. We can take any questions if there are, or comments from the audience, or if you have any more thoughts on it, something that you picked up or something else that you would like to share with the audience, then please go ahead and then we can summarize and close. No?
I just want to say thank you to Nitin, because I didn't have any time to recharge this year. I was just in Japan forever, working on operations, and then didn't utilize the creative side of my mind. So it was refreshing. Thank you.
Right, thanks.
And for me, it was a really nice break. Initially, when I got the list, I was like, oh my God, I have to start thinking about all these photos and have so many. But it was really calming to go through, and then to kind of realize that, yeah, I miss traveling, but then I've already seen so much, and to be really thankful for that.
Ivan, any closing thoughts?
It was actually a challenge looking through all the photos. I mean, I have so many photos from all the years that I've been exploring, but it really was so heartening to see photos that I've taken long before, and memories of all the things that I've learned along the way as I've traveled around.
Right. So just a quick recap. First thing was that resilience is not about how you endure things. It's about how you recharge yourself. And photos are a great way to recharge yourself, but it's not the photos that you take but with your camera, but it's the photos that you take in your mind and the photos that you keep in your mind, which really create that resilience and calm inside you. And the greatest thing that we learn is, like with a group of like-minded friends, you can create a resilience network. Just this simple activity helps us get a glimpse of window into each other's lives, understand a little bit of ourselves, and without judging each other, without giving advice or without preaching, we can allow for each other's thoughts to come out and help build our own resilience and find our own answers, right? So I hope I really enjoyed this session. Thanks for sending all those lovely pictures and helping all of us travel to different corners of the world.
Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you, Nitin. It's always lovely.
Thanks.